This empire ruled the world before Rome even knew it existed. Short pause. It conquered nations without erasing their identity. Short pause. And its ideas still shape how the modern world is governed, even today. Music slowly rises. History tells us that empires rise, and empires fall. But some stories refuse to disappear. Long before Rome, long before Europe found its voice, one empire rewrote the meaning of power. It ruled millions across continents, not through fear alone, but through vision. Its influence still echoes in modern law, administration, and culture. Yet its full story is rarely told. This is not just the history of an empire. It is the origin story of how civilizations are ruled. And that story begins with one man. A brief pause. Cyrus the Great. Cruelty to survive. That an empire could rise not only through the sword, but through vision, tolerance, and trust. And with that idea, Persia changed history forever. In a world where empires ruled through fear, Persia chose a different path. While conquerors burned cities and erased identities, the Persian Empire protected them. What followed was not weakness, but a revolutionary form of power. Cyrus the Great understood something no ruler before him truly grasped. An empire built on terror would eventually collapse. But an empire built on respect could last forever. Where Persian armies marched, cultures survived. Temples remained standing. Languages were preserved. Local laws continued to govern daily life. When Babylon fell, its gods were honored, not destroyed. Its people were freed, not enslaved. Exiled communities were allowed to return home, to rebuild, to worship freely. This was unheard of in the ancient world. Persian rule did not demand identity in exchange for obedience. Instead, it offered stability, justice, and dignity. Conquered peoples were not treated as subjects alone, but as partners in empire. From Egypt to Anatolia, from Mesopotamia to Central Asia, diversity became Persia's greatest strength. Local leaders governed alongside Persian administrators. Traditions flourished under imperial protection. This philosophy was later carved into clay, the Cyrus cylinder, a declaration of justice, freedom, and respect that many historians consider the earliest expression of human rights. Not written for propaganda, but practiced across an empire. Tolerance was not accidental, it was strategy. It reduced rebellion, encouraged loyalty, and allowed Persia to rule lands no army alone could control. While other empires ruled through chains, Persia ruled through trust. And in doing so, it proved that ideas could conquer where armies could not. This was the Persian way. An empire that did not erase the world it ruled, but allowed it to endure. The Persian Empire was vast, powerful, unstoppable. But size alone does not create greatness. Order does. When Darius the Great took the throne, he inherited an empire stretched across continents, and one mistake away from collapse. Rebellion simmered. Distances were immense. Control was fragile. Darius did not answer chaos with fear. He answered it with structure. He reshaped Persia into the most advanced administrative state the ancient world had ever seen. The empire was divided into provinces, satrapies, each governed, taxed, and supervised with precision. Power was separated. No single man controlled army, law, and wealth. Satraps governed. Generals commanded armies. Judges enforced law. And above them all, the king. To watch over this vast system, royal inspectors traveled the empire, the eyes and ears of the king. Nothing escaped imperial oversight. Corruption was hunted. Loyalty was rewarded. For the first time in history, taxation was standardized. Regions paid according to ability, not cruelty. Trade flourished. Revolts declined. Darius connected the empire with roads that defied geography. Royal highways crossed deserts and mountains, allowing messengers to travel faster than any empire before. Orders reached distant provinces in days, not months. Gold and silver coinage unified economies. Law unified justice. Administration unified cultures. Persia became more than conquered land. It became a functioning civilization. This was empire as engineering. Power designed, not improvised. A system so effective that future empires would copy it for centuries. Rome learned from it, Islamic caliphates refined it, modern states still echo it. Darius proved that conquest builds empires, but administration keeps them alive. At its greatest height, the Persian Empire was not just a kingdom. It was a world, from the distant waters of the Indus River to the rocky shores of the Mediterranean Sea. One empire ruled lands no power before it had ever unified. Deserts, mountains, forests, and seas all lay within Persian control. Egyptian temples stood under Persian banners. Babylonian cities paid tribute to Persian kings. Greek ports traded within a Persian-dominated world. Millions lived under a single imperial authority, not as one people, but as many civilizations bound together. In the east, Persia reached into the rich lands of South Asia, securing fertile valleys and vital trade routes. In the north, it controlled Central Asian corridors where nomads and merchants crossed continents. To the west, Persia dominated Anatolia, the Levant, and Egypt, the ancient world's greatest centers of wealth and culture. This vast reach placed Persia at the crossroads of global exchange. Gold, spices, silk, grain, ideas, and technologies flowed across imperial roads. What had once been distant civilizations were now connected under one system. Distance did not weaken Persian control. Infrastructure defeated geography. Royal roads carried messages across thousands of kilometers with astonishing speed. Couriers rode day and night, ensuring that the king's command reached the edges of the empire. For the first time, geography obeyed power. Yet Persia did not demand sameness. Languages were spoken freely. Religions were practiced openly. Local traditions remained intact. The empire proved something radical. Unity did not require uniformity. From the Indus to the Mediterranean, people lived within a shared political framework while preserving their identity. This scale of governance reshaped how humanity imagined empire. Persia did not merely expand borders. It expanded the very concept of civilization. And the world would never look the same again. Empires are not held together by armies alone. They are held together by systems. The Persian Empire ruled lands too vast for any single ruler to control by force. Its true power lay in an administrative machine designed to govern diversity without destroying it. At the heart of this system stood the satraps, provincial governors appointed by the king himself. They were responsible for law, order, and taxation, acting as the empire's local administrators. But no satrap ruled unchecked. Persian power was divided by design. Military commanders answered directly to the king. Judges enforced imperial law independently. And royal inspectors, the eyes and ears of the king, traveled constantly, watching, listening, reporting. This separation of power prevented rebellion, corruption, and ambition from taking root. No province could rise alone. No official could rule as a king. Local traditions were not erased. They were integrated. Native officials remained in office. Regional laws were respected. Multiple languages were used for administration, ensuring clarity across cultures. Taxation followed order, not oppression. Each province contributed according to its resources: agriculture, trade, or industry. Predictability replaced exploitation. Commerce thrived. When the world's greatest empire met a handful of divided city-states, history expected an easy victory. Persia ruled continents. Greece ruled itself. Yet this imbalance would ignite one of the most legendary confrontations the ancient world had ever seen. The conflict began not in Greece, but in Asia Minor. Greek cities under Persian rule rebelled, challenging imperial authority. For Persia, this was not rebellion, it was defiance. Darius the Great responded with force. The Persian war machine moved west, vast and unstoppable. But at Marathon, something unexpected happened. A smaller Greek army held its ground. The Persian advance was checked, and a myth of resistance was born. Years later, Xerxes returned with an army so large it seemed endless. Bridges were thrown across seas. Mountains shook under marching feet. At Thermopylae, a narrow pass became immortal. A few stood against many. Sacrifice turned into legend. But land was not the only battlefield. At Salamis, the Persian fleet met Greek strategy. Confined waters turned numbers into weakness. The tide of war shifted. Yet Persia did not collapse. The Persian Empire had ruled the known world for nearly 2 centuries. Its power seemed eternal, but history was about to move faster than Persia ever imagined. From the west came a young king with an impossible ambition. Alexander of Macedon did not fear the empire. He challenged it. In 334 BCE, his army crossed into Asia Minor. Persia still possessed wealth beyond measure and forces beyond counting, yet its unity had weakened. At the river Granicus, Persian resistance cracked. At Isis, the great king Darius III fled the battlefield. And at Gaugamela, the fate of the Achaemenid Empire was sealed. Persian numbers meant nothing against discipline, speed, and leadership. Satraps hesitated. Allies defected. The image of Persian invincibility shattered. City after city opened its gates. Treasuries fell into Macedonian hands. The heart of empire lay exposed. Then came Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of Persia, a symbol of imperial glory. Its palaces were looted. Its flames lit the night sky. The world understood the message. Persia had fallen. Yet Alexander did not erase Persia. He adopted Persian dress, customs, and royal titles. He ruled not as a destroyer, but as a successor. Persian administrators remained. Persian systems endured. Persian culture survived conquest. The Achaemenid throne was gone. But Persia itself was not defeated. Because empires can fall in battle. Yet civilizations endure long after the last sword is lowered. From the ashes of Alexander's shattered empire, a new Persian power began to rise, quietly, patiently, and without spectacle. While the world's attention remained fixed on Hellenistic kings and Mediterranean wars, history was turning eastward. This was the rise of the Parthian Empire. In the 3rd century BCE, from the windswept plains of northeastern Iran, a nomadic people known as the Parni seized an opportunity history rarely offers. Led by Arsaces I, they broke away from Seleucid control and claimed independence. What began as a regional revolt would grow into one of the longest-lasting and most underestimated empires of the ancient world. Parthia did not seek domination through conquest alone. It mastered survival. Unlike the centralized empires before it, Parthia ruled through flexibility. Power was shared among noble families. Local rulers retained authority. Loyalty mattered more than uniformity. This loose structure, often mistaken for weakness, became Parthia's greatest strength. While rigid empires fractured under pressure, Parthia bent and endured. Its true power lay not in walls or cities, but in motion. The Parthian army was built around cavalry. Fast, lethal, and relentless. Horse. Archers moved like shadows across the battlefield, striking from a distance before vanishing beyond reach. Heavily armored cataphracts charged with devastating force, shattering enemy lines. And then there was the tactic that would echo through military history. The Parthian shot. Riding away from the enemy, archers would twist in the saddle and fire backward, a deadly illusion of retreat. To pursue was to die. This warfare was perfectly suited to the vast landscapes of Iran and Mesopotamia, and terrifying to Rome. For centuries, Rome had crushed every rival in its path. But when Roman legions marched east, they met an enemy they could not pin down, could not outmaneuver, and could not defeat. In 53 BCE, at Carrhae, the illusion of Roman invincibility collapsed. A Parthian force annihilated a Roman army. Crassus, one of Rome's most powerful men, was killed. Legions were destroyed without ever closing for battle. It was not just a military defeat. It was psychological warfare. Rome had met its equal. From that moment on, the Near East became a permanent frontier of conflict. Parthian kings and Roman emperors clashed again and again, neither able to destroy the other. Borders shifted, cities changed hands, but balance endured. Parthia became the great buffer between East and West. Beyond war, Parthia controlled something even more powerful: trade. The Silk Road passed through Parthian territory, linking China, Central Asia, India, and the Mediterranean. Silk, spices, precious metals, and ideas flowed through Parthian lands. Merchants paid tribute, empires negotiated. Parthia stood at the center of global exchange. Greek culture blended with Persian tradition. Coins bore Hellenistic imagery alongside Iranian symbols. Art, language, and architecture reflected a world where civilizations overlapped rather than erased one another. Parthian kings ruled from cities like Ctesiphon, commanding wealth generated not by conquest, but by connection. Yet this decentralization came at a cost. Rival noble families competed for power. Succession disputes weakened central authority. Over time, internal fractures grew deeper. Rome remained relentless. Pressure mounted, and from within Persia itself, a new force began to rise. In the 3rd century CE, a local ruler named Ardashir challenged Parthian authority. Claiming descent from ancient Persian kings, he offered something Parthia no longer could: unity. The Parthian Empire fell not in a single battle, but through gradual erosion. Yet its legacy endured. For nearly 500 years, Parthia had done the impossible. It halted Rome, controlled global trade routes, preserved Persian identity after Alexander, and proved that power did not always belong to the most centralized or the most brutal. Sometimes, power belonged to those who understood how to move, how to adapt, and how to survive. The Parthian Empire may not dominate popular memory, but without it, the balance of the ancient world would have collapsed. And history would have taken a very different path. From the fading shadows of Parthian rule, a new Persian power emerged, one that did not seek balance, but dominance. This was not a quiet transition. It was a declaration. In the early 3rd century CE, a local ruler from the region of Persis challenged an empire grown complacent. His name was Ardashir, and with a single victory, he ended 5 centuries of Parthian rule and announced the return of an ancient idea, the rebirth of Persian greatness. Ardashir did not present himself as a new king. He presented himself as a restorer, a man chosen to revive the glory of the old Achaemenid kings, whose memory still haunted Persian identity. To rule was not merely political, it was sacred. Thus began the Sassanian Empire. Unlike the decentralized Parthians, the Sassanians built a state of iron discipline and central authority. Power flowed downward from the throne, reinforced by ideology, ritual, and law. The king was no longer just a ruler, he was the chosen guardian of cosmic order. Religion became the backbone of empire. Zoroastrianism, long practiced across Iran, was elevated to state religion. Fire temples rose across the land, their eternal flames symbolizing purity, truth, and divine favor. Priests gained political influence, shaping law, morality, and imperial identity. Faith and state fused into a single force, binding the population through shared belief and purpose. This unity fueled expansion. The Sassanian military was formidable. Disciplined infantry, elite cavalry, and siege technology refined through constant war. Heavy armored horsemen thundered across battlefields, their presence alone enough to shatter morale. Fortresses guarded borders, roads carried troops with precision, and across the western frontier stood Rome. For over 4 centuries, the Sassanian Empire and the Roman, later Byzantine, Empire collided in one of history's longest and most brutal rivalries. This was not a clash of tribes. It was a duel between civilizations. Cities were besieged, emperors were captured, borders shifted endlessly across Mesopotamia, Armenia, and the Levant. At times, the Sassanians stood triumphant. Roman legions fell, territories were claimed, Persian banners flew deep into imperial Roman lands. These wars were not merely territorial, they were ideological. Each empire viewed itself as the rightful center of the world, the truer heir of civilization. Victory was validation, defeat was humiliation, yet war did not consume the Sassanian spirit. Within its cities, culture flourished. Architecture reached new heights. Grand palaces, vaulted halls, monumental reliefs carved into stone. Kings were immortalized in rock, crowned by divine symbols, standing over fallen enemies. Art became propaganda, storytelling, and identity combined. Law was refined and recorded, forming systems that emphasized order, hierarchy, and justice. These legal traditions would later influence Islamic governance long after the empire itself had fallen. Science and scholarship thrived. Sassanian Persia became a center of learning, where knowledge from Greece, India, and Central Asia converged. Medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy advanced within imperial institutions. Texts were translated, preserved, and expanded, many of which would later fuel the Islamic Golden Age. The empire became a bridge of civilizations, transmitting ancient knowledge forward through history. Trade enriched the state. Situated along vital Silk Road routes, the Sassanians controlled commerce between East and West. Silk, spices, metals, and ideas passed through Persian lands. Wealth flowed into cities like Ctesiphon, the imperial capital, one of the largest and most magnificent cities of the ancient world. Yet power carries a cost. Religious rigidity bred tension. Heavy taxation strained farmers and soldiers alike. Constant warfare drained resources and lives. By the 7th century, the empire stood exhausted. Internal divisions weakened unity. Succession disputes fractured authority. And from the south, a new force rose, unified by faith, momentum, and belief. Arab-Muslim armies crossed into Persian territory, not as raiders, but as revolutionaries. Battle after battle, the Sassanian defenses collapsed. The old systems could no longer sustain endless war. In 651 CE, the last Sassanian king fell. But Persia did not vanish. Its administrators served new rulers. Its scholars shaped new civilizations. Its language, culture, and ideas endured. The Sassanian Empire died, but it did not disappear. It left behind a legacy of governance, law, religion, and identity so powerful that even its conquerors adopted it. Persia had fallen before, and yet, it always returned. Because some civilizations are not defined by how they rule, but by how deeply they endure in the fabric of history. When the armies of Islam swept across the Iranian plateau in the 7th century, the fall of the Sassanian Empire appeared final. Kings were gone, fire temples dimmed, an imperial order that had ruled for centuries collapsed in less than a generation. To many observers, it seemed that Persia had vanished from history. But history was not finished with Persia. What followed was not extinction, but transformation. The sword conquered land, but it could not conquer memory, language, or intellect. Slowly, quietly, Persia reshaped the very civilization that replaced it. The early Islamic caliphates inherited an empire far larger than anything Arabia had known. To rule it, they turned to those who already understood empire. Persian administrators, scribes, and scholars stepped into the machinery of power, carrying with them centuries of bureaucratic experience. Tax systems, provincial governance, court ceremony, and imperial protocol all bore unmistakable Persian influence. The Abbasid Caliphate, ruling from Baghdad, adopted Persian models of administration almost entirely. Baghdad itself reflected Sassanian urban planning and royal tradition. Persia no longer ruled politically, yet it governed from within. Language became the empire's quiet weapon. Arabic was the language of revelation, law, and scripture. But Persian survived as the language of culture, history, and identity. Over time, it returned stronger than before, enriched with Islamic ideas yet rooted in ancient memory. Poets gave Persia a voice again. Through epic verse and lyrical mastery, Persian literature preserved pre-Islamic history while celebrating Islamic civilization. Kings, heroes, and myths were woven into poetry that shaped identity across centuries. Persian became the language of courts from Central Asia to the Indian subcontinent. Culture followed. Persian art, architecture, and aesthetics reshaped the Islamic world. Gardens symbolized paradise. Domes and arches echoed ancient designs. Courtly customs reflected Sassanian ideals of kingship and order. Even Islamic political thought absorbed Persian concepts of governance, justice, and authority. Knowledge flourished. Persian scholars stood at the heart of the Islamic Golden Age. They translated Greek, Indian, and Persian texts into Arabic, preserving it otherwise have vanished. Medicine, astronomy, mathematics, chemistry, and philosophy advanced under Persian minds working within Islamic institutions. Hospitals, observatories, and libraries flourished in Persian-influenced cities. What Europe would later rediscover during the Renaissance had passed first through Persian hands. Trade expanded Persia's influence even further. Situated at the crossroads of the Islamic world, Persian lands connected east and west. Road commerce thrived. Ideas traveled alongside goods. Persia became a cultural bridge linking China, India, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean. Dynasties rose that spoke Persian, ruled Persian lands, and revived Persian identity. The Sassanids, Buyids, and later the Seljuks governed in the name of Islam, but through Persian culture and administration. Islam did not erase Persian identity. It absorbed it. Even conquest by Turks and Mongols could not extinguish it. Invaders adopted Persian language, art, and governance. Persian remained the language of courts, scholarship, and poetry. Empires changed hands, but culture endured. By the time modern Iran emerged, Persian civilization had survived more than 1,000 years without an empire of its own. It had outlived conquerors, religions, and political orders. Persia proved something history rarely acknowledges. Empires can fall, kings can vanish, but civilizations that adapt, influence, and endure never truly die. Persia did not survive by resisting change. It survived by shaping it, and in doing so, it became one of the most enduring cultural forces in human history. They came with armies. They came with faith. They came with the certainty that Persia had reached its end. Empires had fallen before. Kings had vanished. Cities had burned. And once again, the world believed Persia was finished. But history had made this mistake before. Because Persia was never just an empire. It was an idea. When the banners of Islam replaced the standards of the Sassanians, something extraordinary happened. The conquerors inherited land, but Persia inherited the future. Slowly, quietly, without spectacle, Persian civilization began to reshape the very world that claimed to replace it. Not through resistance, not through rebellion, but through influence. The caliphates ruled vast territories, yet behind the throne stood Persian administrators. The courts spoke Arabic, yet they moved with Persian ceremony. The empire expanded, yet it ran on Persian systems. Power changed hands. Culture did not. Persian scholars filled libraries with knowledge rescued from extinction. Persian minds translated the wisdom of Greece, India, and antiquity into living science. Persian physicians healed empires. Persian astronomers mapped the heavens. Persian thinkers asked questions that would shape civilizations yet unborn. And when the sword grew silent, poetry spoke. Persian verse carried memory across centuries. It preserved kings long dead. It gave voice to heroes turned to dust. It reminded the world of where it had come from. From Central Asia to India, from Baghdad to Anatolia, Persian became the language of culture, intellect, and identity. Empires ruled in its name. Conquerors adopted it. Invaders were transformed by it. Time tried again. Turks arrived. Mongols followed. Cities burned. Libraries collapsed. The world shook. And yet, Persia endured. The conquerors learned Persian. They governed like Persians. They built courts shaped by Persian tradition. History repeated the same lesson again and again. You can conquer land. You can defeat armies. But you cannot erase a civilization that knows how to survive. Persia did not cling to the past. It adapted. It absorbed. It transformed. Islam did not destroy Persian identity. Persian identity enriched Islam. The fusion created something greater than either alone. a civilization that carried faith, reason, art, and memory forward together. Centuries passed, borders shifted, dynasties rose and fell, the world modernized, yet Persia's legacy remained embedded in language, law, art, architecture, and thought. Its influence stretched far beyond maps and timelines. This is the secret history rarely told. The greatest civilizations are not remembered for how loudly they ruled, but for how deeply they endure. Persia ruled empires, then it ruled minds. It fell in battle, then it conquered history. And even today, when we speak of tolerance, administration, culture, poetry, and governance, we are still echoing Persian ideas, often without realizing it. Because Persia never truly disappeared. It became invisible power, silent influence, living memory. Empires rise like fire, they burn bright, and they vanish. But civilizations like Persia, they become the foundation on which the world continues to stand. And that is why, even after thousands of years, the story of Persia does not end. It continues, in every system that values order over chaos, in every culture that survives conquest, and in every civilization that understands that true power is not domination, but endurance. History is not written by those who forget. It is carried forward by those who choose to remember. If this story made you see the ancient world differently, then this channel is for you. Here, we don't just tell history. We uncover the forces that shaped civilization itself. Every empire you know, every idea you recognize, has a deeper story waiting to be told. And this journey doesn't end here. If you want more cinematic, deeply researched documentaries like this, subscribe to the channel and become part of a community that values real history. If this video gave you something new, leave a like. It helps this story reach others. And tell us in the comments, which civilization should we explore next? Because history only survives when people choose to keep it alive. Subscribe, like, comment, and stay curious.